My daughter-in-law spent 12 years turning my son against me, treating me like a bad memory until I was dead to them. Then I quietly sold my medical patents for $25 million and bought a mansion in Lake Forest, expecting peace. But the moment the ink was dry, they showed up at my door with 12 suitcases, pushing past me with a smirk that said, "We're moving in, Dad." They saw a lonely, trembling old man they could manipulate for an inheritance. They had no idea they had just walked into a trap set by a man who spent 40 years controlling life and death, and I was about to teach them that you can't infect a sterile field without getting cut out. If you appreciate justice served cold, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because this surgery is about to get messy. The doorbell didn't just ring, it screamed through the silence of the house. I stood on the limestone balcony, my hand frozen around a glass of bourbon. For 40 years I worked as a perfusionist. My job was to run the heart-lung machine during open-heart surgery. I controlled the flow. I monitored the pressure. If a line kinked or if the pressure dropped, people died. I learned to live in a state of quiet, controlled alert. But this ring was different. It wasn't a warning alarm on a machine. It was a breach. I set the glass on the railing. The ice clinked, a small, sharp sound in the vast emptiness of my $6.5 million sanctuary. My hand trembled. It wasn't age. I was 70, but my hands were still steady enough to thread a needle. This was instinct. My heart rate kicked up, a rhythm I knew too well. Thump, 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 thump. I knew that ring. It was the sound of a past I had buried 12 years ago, climbing out of the grave. I walked through the living room of my new Lake Forest mansion. It was a beautiful house, but tonight it felt like a museum. Cold, echoing, my boots, old, worn leather that I refused to trade for dress shoes, clicked against the polished marble floor. Step, step, step. The sound bounced off the high ceilings. I felt small in my own home. I reached the foyer. The heavy oak double doors stood between me and the world outside. I took a breath, checking my own vitals out of habit. Steady. Oxygen in. Carbon dioxide out of habit. Steady. Oxygen in. Carbon dioxide out. I pulled the handle. The heavy door swung open with a soft groan of expensive hinges. The air left my lungs. 3 people stood on my porch under the yellow buzz of the security light. 2 ghosts and a stranger. Mason, my son. He looked older than 45. His face was puffy, his skin gray and clammy. Sweat beaded on his forehead, even though the evening air was cool. He wiped it away with a shaking hand, a nervous tic he had since he was a boy. He looked like a pump that was failing, overworked and ready to seize. Next to him stood Veronica, my daughter-in-law, the woman who had turned my own blood against me. She hadn't changed. If Mason was the failing pump, she was the scalpel, sharp, cold, precise. Veronica wore a coat that probably cost more than my first car. She didn't look at me. Not at first. Her eyes were busy scanning the foyer behind me. They were hungry eyes. She looked at the crystal chandelier, the marble floors, the sweeping staircase. She wasn't looking at a father. She was looking at an asset. Behind them, hidden in the shadow of a mountain of luggage, was a girl. Emma, my granddaughter. I hadn't seen her since she was a toddler, barely walking. She was 16 now, but she didn't look like a teenager. She looked like a casualty. She was pale, dangerously pale. As a medical professional, I spotted the signs instantly. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. Her lips were dry. She was shivering in a thin denim jacket that offered no protection against the lake breeze. She was twisting a loose thread on her sleeve. Over and over, twist, pull, twist, pull, twist, pull. She didn't look rebellious or angry. She looked terrified. I gripped the door handle until my knuckles turned white. A mixture of anger and grief flooded my chest. I waited. I waited for an apology. I waited for, "I'm sorry, Dad." I waited for, "We missed you," but silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Veronica stepped forward. She brushed past me as if I were the hired help. "Well," she said. Her voice was sharp, like glass breaking on a stone floor. "You certainly hid this well." She spun around in the foyer, her heels clicking on the marble. Click-clack, click-clack. "I must say I am impressed," she said, looking up at the ceiling. "It definitely has enough room for all of us." I froze. The sheer audacity paralyzed me for a second. 12 years of silence, 12 years of not knowing if I was dead or alive. and she walks into my home like she holds the deed? My protective instincts surged. This was my sterile field. She was the contaminant. I stepped in front of her, blocking the path to the living room. "Hold on," I said. My voice sounded rusty, like gravel grinding together. I hadn't spoken to anyone in days. "You are not coming in here." I raised a calloused hand and pointed toward the dark driveway. "Get your bags. Get off my property." Veronica stopped. She looked at me, and then she laughed. It wasn't a warm sound. It sounded like ice cracking on a frozen lake. "Oh, Art, stop being dramatic." She adjusted her silk scarf with a casual flick of her wrist. "We are family, and you aren't going to turn us away." She stepped aside, revealing the girl behind her. She grabbed Emma by the shoulder too hard and shoved her forward. "Not when your granddaughter is sick." Emma stumbled. She caught her balance and looked up at me. I looked into her eyes. I didn't see manipulation there. I saw fear, pure, unadulterated fear. Her pupils were dilated. Her breathing was shallow. "Grandpa?" she whispered. That single word hit harder than a sledgehammer to the chest. It bypassed my defenses. I looked at Mason. He was staring at his shoes, unable to meet my gaze. "What is wrong with her?" I asked. My voice was hard, professional. I was diagnosing, not socializing. "Just a flu," Veronica said quickly. Too quickly? "She needs a warm bed." She smirked, a small, tight curving of her lips. "You aren't that cruel, are you, Art? To leave a child in the cold. It was a trap. I knew it was a trap. I could feel the steel jaws waiting to snap shut. She was using the girl as a human shield. She knew I was a hard man, but she knew I had a soft spot for children. She knew I had spent my life keeping blood flowing through tiny bodies in operating rooms. I looked at Emma, swaying on her feet. She looked like she was about to faint. I had to spring the trap. I had no choice. "Bring her in," I said. "But just her. You two can wait in the car." Mason didn't wait. He rushed past me, head down, avoiding eye contact. "Hi, Dad," he muttered. It sounded like a whimper. It was the sound of a broken man. He dragged 3 massive suitcases into my foyer. Scrape. The sound of plastic wheels dragging across my polished floor set my teeth on edge. It sounded like a bone saw. I watched them invade. The smell of Veronica's expensive, heavy perfume instantly drowned out the scent of old wood and lemon oil I loved. The atmosphere of my home shifted. The peace was dead. I closed the door. The heavy thud echoed through the house, sealing us in. Veronica was already inspecting the furniture. She ran a manicured hand along the back of my Italian leather sofa. She looked like a shopper checking for defects. "Nice," she said. "Did you win the lottery, Art? Or did you rob a client?" I ignored the jab. I looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. "You have 30 minutes, I said. Veronica turned, her eyebrows raising. "Excuse me, 30 minutes to explain why I shouldn't call the police and have you removed for trespassing." She laughed again. She sat on my sofa, crossing her legs, making herself the queen of my castle. "You won't call the police, Art?" "Why?" I asked. My hand inched toward the phone in my pocket. "Because we are all you have." She leaned forward. Her eyes narrowed. "Martha is dead. You are alone." She hissed the words. She knew exactly where to cut to cause the most pain. "You need us, and frankly, you owe us." "I owe you?" I asked quietly. The pressure in my chest was building. "You owe Mason," she said, "for the terrible childhood he had, growing up with a father who smelled like fertilizer and antiseptic, a father who was never there." She looked around the room with disdain. "It's time to pay up." I looked at my son. He was trembling by the door, still clutching the handle of a suitcase. I looked at Emma. She was slumped against the wall, eyes closed, looking gray. I realized then what was happening. They didn't come to apologize. They didn't come to reconnect. They were vultures, and they had come to feed. I made a decision right then. It wasn't born of charity. It was born of strategy. In the operating room, when a heart stops, you don't nank. You assess the damage. You stabilize the patient. You look for the cause. They were the infection. If I kicked them out now, they would disappear into the night, taking the girl with them. I would never know what was wrong with her. I would never know why she looked like a ghost of the child I once held. I would play their game. I would let the Trojan horse inside my wall. Not because I was weak, but because I needed to see what was inside the belly of the beast.
Fine, I said.
The word tasted like ash. You can stay, Veronica smiled. It wasn't a smile of gratitude. It was the smile of a predator who just felt the trap snap shut on its prey. I knew you would see reason, Art, she purred. Only for tonight, I warned. I walked to the wall by the entryway. There was a small brass hook where I kept the spare key to the master suite, my sanctuary. I took the key. The metal was cold against my palm. I slid it into my pocket. My house. My rules, I said. This isn't a hotel, and it certainly isn't your home. I turned my gaze to Mason. He was scuffing his boots on the marble, looking everywhere but at me. Don't think you can manipulate me, Veronica, I added, my voice low. Then, to my son, take your shoes off. You're attracting mud. He scrambled to obey, hopping on one foot, nearly tripping over a suitcase. He looked terrified of me. Or maybe he was terrified of something else entirely. That sleep was impossible. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling. The house settled around me, the timber creaking in the cooling air. I got up and went to my study. I didn't turn on the lights. I just watched the glow of the security monitors. The cameras painted my hallway in ghostly shades of gray and white. I saw that Veronica was standing outside the door to my office. She was whispering to Mason. The microphone on the camera was sensitive. I had installed the best system money could buy. The old man is senile, she hissed. Her voice was distorted by the speakers, metallic and cruel. Did you see his hands shake? She continued, gesturing wildly. He is weak. He's barely holding it together. I stared at the screen. I held up my own hand in the dark room. It was perfectly still. I wasn't shaking from age. I was shaking from the adrenaline of the hunt. Give me a week, Veronica said, leaning in close to Mason's face. I will get him to sign power of attorney. We will take it all. Try it, I thought. The anger burned cold in my gut. Just try it, I watched Mason. He didn't look convinced. He looked sick. He kept checking his phone, the screen lighting up his sweaty face. The next morning I walked down the grand staircase. The smell hit me first. Burnt butter and the acrid smoke of overheated Teflon. Faster, Mrs. Higgins. We are starving. The voice was shrill. I rounded the corner into the kitchen. Veronica was standing by the island, tapping her nails on the granite counter. She was barking orders at Mrs. Higgins, my housekeeper. Mrs. Higgins was 60 years old, a gentle soul who made the best blueberry scones in Illinois. She was trembling, trying to flip pancakes with a shaking hand. She looked close to tears. I felt a surge of protective rage. This woman had been the only person to check on me when Martha died. I walked over and put a firm hand on Mrs. Higgins's shoulder. I felt the tension leave her body. Take a break, Mrs. Higgins, I said softly. Go upstairs. I'll handle this. She looked at me with wide, grateful eyes, then scurried away like a frightened mouse. It scurried away like a frightened mouse. I poured myself a cup of coffee. It was lukewarm. I took a sip, staring over the rim of the mug at Veronica. You treat people with respect here, I said. Veronica scoffed. She picked up a piece of burnt toast and dropped it back on the plate. You are too soft, Art. That is why you were just a gardener for so long. She didn't know about the medical patents. She didn't know about the investments. To her, I was just the man who tended the roses. Mason was sitting at the table, shoveling eggs into his mouth as if he hadn't eaten in days. He didn't look up. He focused on the food with a desperate intensity. Emma sat at the far end of the long table. She was picking at a piece of dry toast, tearing it into tiny confetti strips. She looked worse than yesterday. Her skin had a gray undertone. Her eyes were dull. Emma, I said, pitching my voice to be gentle. Eat some eggs. You need the protein. She looked up, about to speak. She's fine, Veronica snapped, cutting her off. She is on a diet. She needs to look good. Look good for what? I asked. She's 16. She should be worrying about homework, not calories. Veronica froze. Just for a fraction of a second, her mask slipped. Her eyes darted to Mason, then back to me. For school, she lied. The lie was smooth, but I heard the catch in it. When we get settled, first impressions matter. Something was wrong, dead wrong. You don't starve a child for school. You starve a jockey before a race. You starve a model before a shoot. Suddenly, a sound shattered the kitchen quiet. Mason's phone rang. It wasn't a normal ringtone. It was a shrill, aggressive alarm. He jumped in his chair so violently he nearly knocked over his juice. He scrambled for the phone, his hands fumbling. He silenced it immediately, shoving it deep into his pocket. His face drained of color, leaving him looking like a corpse. "Who is that?" I asked. I kept my voice casual, but my eyes were locked on his reaction. "Spam," Mason stammered. He wiped sweat from his upper lip. "Just telemarketers. You know how they are." I knew that look. I'd seen it on patients who were told they had days to live. That wasn't spam. That was terror. Veronica glared at him with venomous eyes. "Control yourself," her expression screamed. She turned to me, plastering a fake smile onto her face. It looked painful. "Anyway, Art, this house, it's magnificent. Is it paid off?" "Cash," I said simply. Her eyes flared. It was like watching a flare ignite in a dark cave. "Greed. Pure, unadulterated greed. Cash," she breathed. The words seemed to intoxicate her. "You know Mason is very good with finances," she said, leaning over the table. "We could help you. Organize things. Ensure your estate is secure." She paused, testing the waters. "Where's the deed?" "Just for safekeeping, of course. You wouldn't want to lose it." There it was, the hook. She wasn't wasting time. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I needed them to think I was vulnerable. I needed them to think the gate was open. "In my office," I said. "Locked?" "Yes," I lied. "But I sometimes forget where I put the key." She looked down the hall toward the heavy oak door of my study. She looked at it the way a starving dog looks at a steak through a butcher shop window. "You should give us a spare," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "In case you forget, we wouldn't want you to be locked out of your own affairs." "I don't forget," I said, tapping my temple. But I let my hand shake just a little as I set the mug down. Take the bait, I thought. Come into my parlor. I needed an ally, and I knew exactly where to find one. I shuffled out the back door, hunched over against the wind, maintaining the charade just in case eyes were watching from the upstairs windows. But the moment I stepped into the detachment of the tool shed, I straightened up. The shed was my real sanctuary. It smelled of motor oil, sawdust, and honest work. It was cold, uninsulated, but it felt safer than the marble mausoleum I had just left. I pulled my burner phone from a hidden, excessive toolbox drawer, a habit from my days handling sensitive medical negotiations. I dialed Mike, my old foreman. He had been with me for 20 years. He was the kind of man who would bury a body for you and never ask why. He answered on the first ring. "Boss?" "They are here, Mike," I said. My voice was steady, stripping away the frail old man act. "The vultures have landed." "I'm coming over," Mike growled instantly. I heard a sharp snap on the other end of the line. A matchstick. Mike only chewed on matches when he was ready to fight. "I can have the boys there in 10, he added. "We'll clear the driveway." "No," I said, leaning against the workbench. I ran my hand over the cold steel of a vice grip. "I don't need muscle yet. I need a script." "A script?" "I'm going to play the poor, confused senior citizen. I need you to play the Grim Reaper." I checked my watch. Precision was key. "Call me in 5 minutes. Scream at me. Be the bank. Be the worst news a man can get." I walked back inside, timing my steps. Before I entered the kitchen, I stopped at a mirror in the hallway. I messed up my silver hair, pulling a few strands loose. I unbuttoned my collar to look disheveled. I focused on my breathing, making it shallow, letting my hands develop a visible tremor. I was no longer Art the perfusionist. I was Art the victim. The phone in my pocket buzzed. I answered it, putting it on speaker, but holding it close, as if I were hard of hearing. "What do you mean, frozen?" I yelled, my voice cracking perfectly. I burst into the kitchen. The room went dead silent. The clatter of silverware stopped. Mason dropped his fork. It hit the plate with a sharp clink. "The bank is calling the loan." I shouted at the empty air, staring wildly at the wall. "Next week? You can't do this! I can't lose the house." I was channeling every terrified patient I had ever seen wake up from anesthesia to bad news. I slumped against the granite counter, sliding down until I was gripping the edge for support. "I have family here, Mike. I can't be on the street." I listened to Mike's garbled shouting on the other end. Then I hung up. I let the phone slide from my hand onto the counter with a defeated clatter. I buried my face in my hands. "Oh God," I moaned. "Oh God." Through the gaps in my fingers, I watched them. Mason looked sick. His face, already pale, turned a shade of green. He looked like he was about to vomit on my floor. He was doing the math. No house meant no money. No money meant no safety from whatever he was running from. But Veronica, she didn't look scared. She didn't look sympathetic. She was calculating. Her eyes shifted immediately from me to the massive sub-zero fridge, then to the expensive espresso machine. She wasn't worried about my homelessness. She was thinking about what she could liquidate before the bank arrived. She was assessing the salvage value of the Titanic, while it was still hitting the iceberg. "Oh, Art," she cooed, her voice dripping with synthetic honey. "Is everything okay? I need to lie down," I muttered, pushing myself off the counter. My heart... I shuffled toward the hallway, dragging my feet. I rounded the corner, out of their sight. Instantly, the shuffle vanished. I straightened my spine. I moved silently, staying on the balls of my feet. A trick I learned moving around operating theaters during long surgery. Instead of going to my room, I slipped into the linen closet next to the guest suite they had claimed. The closet was tight and smelled of lavender sachets and dust. I left the door cracked a fraction of an inch, just enough to hear, not enough to be seen. I waited in the dark. My own heart was beating slow and strong. Minutes later, they came into the bedroom. The door slammed. "We have to leave, Veronica." Mason whined. His voice was high, pitched with panic. "He's broke. The bank is taking it. We came here for nothing." "Shut up, you idiot," Veronica hissed. I heard the sound of a slap, not on flesh, but maybe a hand hitting a mattress. "Think, Mason. The bank takes it next week. That gives us 7 days. 7 days for what?" "To get guardianship," she said. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly rational. "He is confused, scared. The stress is breaking him," she continued. "We get him to sign power of attorney tomorrow. We tell him it's to save the house, or protect the assets. Then what? Then we strip the carcass," she said. The phrase made my blood run cold. Carcass, I wasn't a person to her. I was meat. "We sell the art, the furniture, the jewelry. We empty the accounts before the bank freezes them. We take what we can and run," she concluded. "He won't sign," Mason argued. "He's stubborn." "He will," Veronica promised. The tone of her voice changed. It became darker, lower, "And if he resists, I have the blue pills." I stopped breathing. The silence in the closet felt heavy, suffocating. "The ones you gave Mom?" Mason asked. His voice trembled. There was horror there, but not enough to stop him. "They make him sleep," she said dismissively. "If he's groggy, he won't read the fine print. He'll sign whatever we put in front of him to make the confusion stop. They were planning to drug me. This wasn't just theft anymore. This was assault. This was calculated medical malpractice. I called Dr. Thorne," she said. "He's coming tonight. He'll write the script for the anxiety medication." Dr. Thorne, the name hit me like a physical blow. I knew him. Everyone in the medical community in Chicago knew him. He was a concierge doctor for the rich, the famous, and the morally bankrupt. He was the guy you called when you had an overdose you didn't want reported or a prescription you didn't need. If Thorne was involved, this wasn't an amateur operation. They weren't just going to rob me, they were going to put me in a medically induced coma and pick my bones clean while I slept. I stepped back from the closet door. My movements were stiff, mechanical. I felt a weight in my chest that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with grief. My son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy I held when he scraped his knees, was plotting to drug me. He was going to let his wife erase my mind so they could pick my pockets. I walked toward the stairs, my feet heavy on the carpet. I felt like I was walking underwater. At the top of the landing, I nearly collided with a small shape in the shadows. It was Emma. She jumped back, clutching a ragged backpack to her chest like a shield. "Emma," I said. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the adrenaline was still humming in my veins. She looked around frantically. Her eyes darted to the closed door of her parents' room, then back to me. She was trembling. "Grandpa," she whispered. The word was barely a breath. "You have to be careful." She stepped closer, grabbing the sleeve of my cardigan. Her grip was surprisingly strong, desperate. "Don't drink the tea," she said. Her eyes were wide, pleading. "What?" "Mom," she cried softly, tears welling up. "She has the pills. She puts them in the tea. She says it's for your nerves." I looked at this terrified girl. She knew. She was living in the same nightmare I had just discovered. "They want to send me away, Grandpa," she choked out. "Who wants to send you away?" "Once they get the money, once you sign. I go to a school in Arizona, a bad school. For troubled girls," she continued, the tears spilling over now, "to fix me." "Why?" I asked, though I was starting to guess. "To get me out of the way." I felt a surge of protective instinct so strong it nearly knocked the wind out of me. I took her hand. It was ice cold. "Come with me," I said. "Where?" she asked, shrinking back. "To get your grandfather's medicine," I said loudly, pitching my voice for the listening ears behind the closed door down the hall. "I need my prescription," I added, grumbling like an old man. I led her down the stairs and out the side door to the garage. The air outside was crisp, biting. It felt clean compared to the rot inside the house. I pulled the tarp off my old Ford truck. It was a beast of machine. 30 years old, built when things were made to last. Unlike the plastic world Veronica lived in. "Get in," I said. We climbed into the cab. The smell of old leather and gasoline surrounded us, a comforting, honest scent. I drove in silence, leaving the mansion behind. I took us to a secluded overlook by the lake, a place where the water crashed against gray rocks. I killed the engine. The silence of the car was heavy. "Talk," I said. I turned to look at her. No lies. No games. "Tell me everything." She broke down. It wasn't a quiet cry. It was a dam breaking. She wailed, her face buried in her hands. "Dad lost everything," she sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "Crypto. Gambling. We lost the house in Florida 6 months ago. But that's not it, is it?" I asked gently. "People lose houses. They don't drug their fathers for house money." She looked up, her face streaked with mascara. "Mr. Moretti," she whispered. The name chilled the air inside the truck. Even in Lake Forest, we knew who Moretti was. He was a loan shark in Chicago, a man who didn't use lawyers, he used baseball bats. "They owe him $800,000, she said. My jaw tightened until my teeth ached. Nearly $1 million. Mason hadn't just failed, he had dug a grave. "He threatened Dad," Emma said, picking at the fraying strap of her bag. "He said time was up." She took a shaky breath. "He has a son. Vinny. He's 25. He's been in jail twice." I felt sick, a nausea that rolled in my gut. I saw where this road was going, and I wanted to scream. "What about Vinny?" I asked. My voice was low, dangerous. Mr. Moretti said, "If Dad can't pay," she choked on the words. She couldn't say it. "He accepts a trade," she finally managed. "Me, he wants me to marry Vinny," she whispered, "to merge the families, to settle the debt." Red. All I saw was red. It washed over my vision, hot and blinding. My son, my own flesh and blood. He wasn't just a failure. He was a monster. He was selling his daughter, his 16-year-old child, to a thug to save his own skin. He was trading her life to cover his gambling losses. I had seen diseased hearts in my career, hearts full of clots, holes, and defects, but I had never seen a heart as black as my son's. I slammed my hand on the dashboard. Wham! The sound was like a gunshot in the small cab. Over my dead body, I snarled, and Emma flinched, pressing herself against the door. "I'm sorry," she cried. I'm sorry. I realized I had scared her. I forced myself to breathe. In, out. Stabilize. No, I said, turning to her, not you. You have nothing to be sorry for. I reached out and took her hand again. We are going to stop them. How? She sniffled, wiping her nose on her sleeve. We have no money. You said the bank. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a cold, hard smile. The smile of a man who knows exactly where to make the incision to cut out the rot. I have resources they can't imagine, I said. I played weak so they would show their hand. Now I know the game. I looked her dead in the eye. Emma, I need you to be brave. Can you do that? I'm scared, she admitted. Good, I said. Fear keeps you sharp. Use it. I dropped Emma at the front gate. I watched her walk up the driveway, her shoulders hunched against the wind. She looked small against the backdrop of the mansion. As I drove away, the sadness in my chest hardened into something else. It became cold. It became precise. For 40 years, I stood in operating rooms while surgeons cut people open. I learned that you cannot save a patient if you are emotional. You have to be a machine. You have to be efficient. I gripped the steering wheel. The old Art, the father, the grandfather was gone. I was the perfusionist now, and I had a blockage to clear. I drove into the city. The skyline of Chicago rose up like a wall of steel and glass. I parked and walked into a building that smelled of money and intimidation. I took the elevator to the 45th floor. Catherine Ross was waiting. She was the sharpest lawyer in the city, a woman who could smile while she destroyed you in court. I walked into her office. She took one look at my face and didn't offer me coffee. Who are we burying, Art? She asked. Not a body, I said, sitting in the leather chair opposite her. A debt. I told her everything. The house, the flu, the pills, the threat from the loan shark. She listened without blinking. When I finished, she opened a file on her desk. I ran the background check on Mason the moment you called, she said. She slid a piece of paper across the mahogany desk. It was a mugshot. My son. Warrants in Florida, she listed off. Wire fraud. Ponzi schemes. He's been running from the law for 3 years. I looked at the picture. Mason looked younger there, but his eyes were the same, weak and shifting.
In the debt?
I asked. It's real, Catherine said. Moretti holds the paper. It's a high-interest street loan. Nasty business. She leaned back. If you pay it, Art, you're just enabling him. He'll gamble it away again in a month. I know, I said. I looked out the window at the gray city below. I'm not going to pay his gambling losses. Then what? Buy it, I said. Catherine blinked, her professional mask slipping for a second. Excuse me? Buy the debt, I repeated. Call Moretti. Offer him full cash value. Today. Wire transfer.
Art, that's $800,000. You're going to hand a criminal nearly $1 million? Yes. Why? Because right now, Moretti owns my son. He holds the leash. I leaned forward. My voice was low and steady. I want the leash, Catherine. I want to be his creditor.
I want to own the debt, I said, because the man who holds the debt calls the shots. Catherine stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, shark-like smile spread across her face. She understood. This wasn't charity. This was a hostile takeover. Done, she said. She reached for her phone. I drove home as the sun began to set. The sky turned a bruised purple. I felt lighter. The fear was gone, replaced by the thrill of the plan. I pulled into the driveway. The house was dark, except for a single light in the downstairs wing, my office. My heart rate didn't spike. I expected this. I walked into the house quietly. I didn't announce myself. The door to my study was ajar. A sliver of yellow light spilled onto the hallway floor. I could hear the soft sounds of rummaging drawers sliding open, papers being shuffled. I crept closer. Veronica was inside. She was behind my desk, invading the one space I had kept private for decades. She was holding a small amber bottle up to the light. My vitamins. Got you, she whispered to herself. I stepped into the doorway, looking for something. She spun around so fast she nearly dropped the bottle. Art, she gasped. She quickly hid the bottle behind her back. Her face flushed red, then went pale. I was looking for a pen, she stammered. I needed to write a note. She realized she was still holding the bottle behind her back. She decided to bluff. She brought it out. I found these, she said, her eyes narrowing. Dioxin, is this for your heart? It was a bottle of simple vitamin D. She hadn't read the label properly in the dim light. She was fishing. I decided to give her exactly what she wanted. I let my shoulders slump. I let my hand develop a rhythmic tremor. Don't tell anyone, I whispered, glancing at the door as if I were afraid of being overheard. Please, I'm sick. Veronica, my heart it's failing. Her eyes lit up. It was subtle, but I saw it. It was the look of a miner striking gold. A sick old man was easier to kill than a healthy one. Oh, Art, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. You need help. You need rest. She stepped around the desk, emboldened. My friend Dr. Thorne is coming tonight, she said fast, pushing the advantage. And Brad, he's a lawyer. They can help protect your assets. If you're sick, we need to make sure everything is safe. Tonight? I asked, sounding weak and confused. Yes, dinner. Then we sign. I suppose, I said, looking at the floor. Good, she smiled. It was a terrible, triumphant smile. She walked past me, out of the room. I stood alone in my office. I checked my watch. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the rats to walk in. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. Dr. Thorne walked in first. He was a man composed entirely of sharp angles and oil. He wore a suit that was too shiny, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I shook his hand. It was wet and cold, like handling a raw organ without gloves. Mr. Sterling, he said, his voice smooth. Veronica tells me you've been having episodes. He led me to the sofa for a preliminary exam. It was a farce. He placed his stethoscope on my chest, but he placed the bell too high, over the manubrium bone. You can't hear a heart murmur through bone. He listened for all of 3 seconds. Rapid decline, he said, turning to Veronica. He didn't even look at me. The arrhythmia is severe. He is agitated. He needs immediate sedation to prevent cardiac arrest. I sat there breathing steadily, my heart beating in a perfect sinus rhythm, listening to him sign my death warrant. Then came Brad, the lawyer. He looked less like a lawyer and more like a man who bet on the wrong horses. He smelled of cheap cologne and desperate sweat. He carried a briefcase that looked worn at the handles. He didn't waste time. He laid the papers on the dining room table. They fanned out like a deck of cards. Guardianship, irrevocable trust transfer, power of attorney. Standard boilerplate, Brad said, avoiding my eyes. Just to protect you, Art. Just in case. We sat for dinner. The atmosphere was brittle. Mrs. Higgins had prepared a roast, but she served it with shaking hands and quickly retreated to the kitchen. Veronica sat at the head of the table. She poured wine for herself, for Mason, for Thorne, and for Brad. And for you, Art, she said softly. Water. We need to keep you hydrated. I watched her hand. It was quick. Practiced. She hovered over my crystal glass. I saw a tiny splash. A faint blue plume swirled in the water, dissolving instantly. Drink up, Art, she said, raising her wine glass. To family. The blue pill. I knew what it was. Midazolam, maybe. Or Rohypnol. Something to make me compliant. Something to make me forget. My hand hovered over the glass. I could feel their eyes on me. 4 pairs of eyes waiting for the old man to swallow the poison. I reached for the salt shaker near the glass. I need salt, I mumbled. I let my hand spasm. I knocked the salt shaker over. It rolled across the table. Oh, clumsy me, I whispered. Veronica's patience snapped. She kicked Mason under the table. I heard the thud of shoe against shinchain. Stop playing with your food, Art, she said, her voice tight. Sign the papers. Now. Before you eat. The bank comes tomorrow, Dad, Mason added, his voice cracking. We have to secure the assets tonight. Brad pushed the stack of papers toward me. Right here, Mr. Sterling, by the X. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy, like a lead weight. I hovered the tip over the signature line. I let it shake. I made a jagged mark, then stopped. It's so many pages, I whined, my voice taking on a high, confused pitch. I should read them. Martha always said I should read before I sign. Just sign it, Veronica snapped. She slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. The room went dead silent. The mask was slipping. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Emma stood up. She was holding a heavy crystal pitcher filled with ice water. Her knuckles were white. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, terrified. But there was a spark there. A question. Do I do it? I gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Execute. She walked behind Brad's chair. I need a refill, she said softly. She stepped closer to the papers, and then she tripped. Oh, the pitcher tilted. Gallons of ice water cascaded onto the table. It wasn't a splash, it was a flood. The water hit the papers. The cheap ink Brad had used began to run immediately. The documents turned into a soggy blue-black mess of pulp. Oh no, and Emma cried, backing away, hands over her mouth. I'm sorry, I slipped. Veronica stood up so fast her chair fell backward with a crash. Her face turned a violent shade of purple. The veins in her neck bulged. You stupid brat, she screamed. She didn't think. She lunged. She swung her hand in a wide, vicious arc. Smack. The sound was sickening, like a gunshot in a canyon. The blow caught Emma on the cheek. She stumbled back, hitting the sideboard. She brought a hand up to her face, her eyes filling with shock and tears. I froze. The air left the room. My heart rate monitor, the internal one I had lived by for 40 years, flatlined. The act dropped. I forgot to hunch. I forgot to shake. I stared at Veronica. For a second she looked at me. She saw the change. She saw the confusion vanish from my eyes, replaced by a cold, murderous clarity. She saw the lion behind the mask. She stepped back, her hand lingering in the air, suddenly afraid. Art? She whispered. I wanted to kill her. I wanted to reach across the table and wrap my hands around her throat. But the trap wasn't sprung yet. If I broke now, they would flee, and Mason would still owe the debt. I forced my body to slump. I forced my hands to tremble. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed. My water, I cried out, staring at the puddle on the table. You spilled my water. I'm thirsty. Veronica breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at me with disgust, then turned back to Emma. Get out, she screamed. Get to your room. Tanya, I will deal with you later. Emma ran. I heard her footsteps fading up the stairs. Brad was trying to dab at the ruined papers with a napkin. They're ruined, he muttered. The signatures are gone. The dates are illegible. We need new papers, Veronica hissed. Print them again, Brad. My printer is in the car, but it's out of ink, Brad stammered. I have to go to the office. Then go. We do this tonight. No, I said. They turned to me. I'm tired, I whimpered. I rubbed my temples. The yelling, it hurts my head. I can't write when people are yelling. Adakarinta started. Tomorrow, I said firmly. At the party. Veronica paused. Party? What party? A housewarming, I said. I want to celebrate the house before the bank takes it. I want to say goodbye properly. I looked up at her, making my eyes look watery and pathetic. Invite your friends, Veronica. Invite the neighbors. I want everyone to see what a good family I have. I'll sign in front of everyone, I promised. A public declaration, so no one can say I was coerced. She stopped. She calculated. Witnesses. A public signing would make the transfer ironclad. It would prevent anyone from challenging it later. It appealed to her vanity and her greed. Fine, she said, smoothing her dress. A cruel smile returned to her lips. Tomorrow night. But if you hesitate, Art, I will put you in a home so fast your head will spin. I won't hesitate, I said. And I meant it. The next evening my house was transformed. It smelled of expensive roast duck, truffle oil, and the heavy, cloying scent of fresh lilies. Veronica had invited the elite of Lake Forest. People I didn't know, and people she wanted to impress. She had dressed me in a suit that was slightly too big, making me look shrunken and frail. She paraded me through the foyer, her hand gripping my arm like a vice. This is my father-in-law, Arthur. She told a woman dripping in diamonds. He's failing, poor dear. But we are here for him. The guests looked at me with pity. They saw a relic, a dying man. Then came the rumble. It started low, a vibration in the floorboards. Then the distinct hiss of air brakes outside. Honk. A massive, deep blast of an air horn shattered the polite cocktail chatter. The heavy front doors swung open. The silence in the rain was instant. Mike stood in the doorway. Behind him were 6 of my best guys from the landscaping company. They weren't wearing tuxedos. They wore car jackets stained with earth. They wore steel-toed boots that left mud on the marble. They smelled of diesel fuel, sawdust, and hard labor. They looked like an invasion force, and in a way Veronica marched over to them, her heels clicking furiously. "Get out," she hissed, trying to keep her voice down. "You are ruining the atmosphere. Who let you in?" "They are my guests," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried. She glared at me, her eyes promising retribution later. "Fine," she whispered, "but you will pay for this embarrassment." She dragged me toward the ballroom. Small stage had been set up with a podium. "It's time," she said. She shoved a stack of index cards into my hand. "Read the cards. Do not deviate. Do not improvise." "I understand," I said. I climbed the steps to the stage. The lights were bright, blinding. I looked out at the sea of faces, strangers drinking my wine, judging my life. I looked for Mason. He was hiding near the back by the bar, nursing a drink. He looked terrified. I looked for Emma. She was standing in the shadows of the mezzanine, watching. She gave me a tiny nod. I gripped the podium. The wood felt solid. This was it. The final incision. Veronica wanted a passing of the torch, I said, into the microphone. The feedback whined for a second. "She wanted you to see my legacy." I looked down at the index cards. "I am old. I am tired. I trust my family." I crumpled the cards in my hand. I dropped the paper ball on the floor. "But there is a misunderstanding," I said. The room went quiet. Veronica took a step forward, her smile faltering. "I built my life on truth," I said. "On precision. In my line of work, you cannot hide a mistake. If you lie, the patient dies." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote control. "Let me show you the real legacy." I pressed the button. A large projection screen descended behind me. The projector hummed to life. The image was grainy, black and white, but the audio was crystal clear. It was the footage from my kitchen. 2 days ago, Veronica's face appeared on the giant screen, distorted and ugly with rage. "He is useless," her voice boomed through the ballroom speakers. "The old fool should have died sooner." The crowd gasped. A ripple of shock went through the room. The scene cut. The linen closet audio played next. "We drug him," Mason's voice whimpered. "We stripped the carcass," Veronica's voice replied. "We sell the art, the furniture, the jewelry." Then the dinner scene, the image was sharp. Emma spilling the water. Veronica standing up. The swing of her arm. Smack. The sound of the slap echoed in the silent ballroom. It was brutal. On the screen, Emma stumbled back, holding her face. Veronica stood frozen near the stage. Her face was as white as the tablecloths. The screen went black. I stepped away from the podium. I stood to my full height. The stoop in my back vanished. The shaking in my hands stopped instantly. I unbuttoned the oversized jacket and tossed it on the floor. I looked at the crowd. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the surgeon. "You thought I was old?" I boomed. My voice was strong, resonant. "You thought I was weak. You thought I was senile." I pointed a steady finger at Veronica. "You planned to drug me with tranquilizers. You planned to steal my home. You hit my granddaughter." "It's a fake," Veronica screamed. Her voice was shrill, desperate. "Deep fake? It's AI. He's crazy. Stop lying," I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. I pulled a document from my inner pocket. "You told me the bank was coming," I said. "You tried to scare me with foreclosure. I bought this house cash. 3 months ago, I held up the deed, and you thought I was a broke gardener. I sold my medical supply company last year," I said. "For $25 million. Mason's glass fell from his hand. It shattered on the floor. $25 million, he mouthed. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. But you, I said, turning my gaze to my son. I threw a thick dossier at his feet. It landed with a heavy thud. Crypto fraud, gambling debts, Ponzi schemes, warrants in 3 states, and $800,000 owed to Mr. Moretti. The mention of the name sucked the air out of the room. The guests began to back away. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was danger. You were going to sell Emma, I said. My voice trembled now. Not with age, but with fury. To a loan shark. To marry his son. To save your own skin. I looked at the crowd. My son was trading his 16-year-old daughter to settle a gambling debt. The guests looked at Mason and Veronica with pure disgust. The social mask was gone. They saw the monsters underneath. Veronica looked like a cornered rat. She looked for an exit, but Mike and his crew were blocking the doors. Dad, please, Mason whimpered. We are family. I am not your father, I said, cold as ice. A father protects his children. You sold yours. Catherine Ross, my lawyer, stepped out from the side of the stage. She walked over to Mason and handed him a single piece of paper. I bought the debt, I said. Mason looked at the paper. His eyes widened. I paid Moretti this morning. I own the note. I own you, Veronica screamed. It was a primal sound of defeat. She lunged at me, her nails curved like claws. Mike stepped in. He didn't hit her, he just blocked her path like a brick wall. She bounced off his chest and fell to the floor. I have options, I said, looking down at them. I can call the police right now. Elder abuse. Attempted fraud. Assault. The district attorney is a friend of mine. You will go to prison for 10 years, I said. Minimum. Exoperandi. Scan for vital and second document. You give me Emma. Full legal custody, I said. You sign away your parental rights. Tonight. And you leave. You disappear. If I ever see you again, I call the cops. I looked at Mason. He was shaking. Mason, I said, sign it or go to jail tonight. Mason didn't hesitate. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't look at his daughter standing on the balcony. He grabbed the pen from Catherine. I'm not going to jail, he shouted, his voice cracking. I can't go to jail. He signed. He gave up his daughter to save his own skin. It was the final confirmation of who he was. You coward, Veronica hissed. She looked at the police sirens flashing through the window. Mike had called them as backup, just in case. She realized it was over. She snatched the pen and signed her name with a vicious scratch. They had sold their daughter for freedom, and I had bought her back. Get out, I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the sound of a door slamming shut forever. Mason didn't look at me. He didn't look at the daughter he had just traded for his own safety. He turned and ran toward the front door, his footsteps heavy and uneven. He looked like a thief fleeing a crime scene. Veronica tried to maintain her dignity. She smoothed her dress, lifted her chin, and glared at Mike. My things, she demanded, her voice trembling with rage. I need my luggage. Mike didn't say a word. He reached behind a pillar and tossed a heavy black plastic bag at her feet. Your luggage, ma'am, Mike growled. She stared at the garbage bag. Then she let out a sound, half scream, half sob, and grabbed it. She fled into the night, her high heels clacking frantically on the driveway until the darkness swallowed her whole. The police officers Mike had called stood by the entrance. They watched them go. One of the officers, a man I knew from town, walked over to me. Do you want to press charges, Mr. Sterling? He asked, looking at the mess on the floor. I looked at the signed papers in my hand. I looked at the empty doorway. I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me, heavy and gray. My hands, steady for so long, began to ache. No, I said quietly. The trash has been taken out. Let them run. The guests scattered quickly. They murmured apologies, avoiding my eyes, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Within 10 minutes, the ballroom was empty. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't the lonely silence of a museum. It was the quiet after a storm. I turned to find Emma. She was still standing near the stage, hugging herself. She looked shell-shocked. I walked over to her. My legs felt heavy. The adrenaline was fading. leaving me feeling every minute of my 70 years. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry you had to see that." She looked up. Her eyes were red, but dry. "They didn't say goodbye," she whispered. The realization was hitting her. Her parents had chosen money over her. "They didn't deserve to," I said firmly. I reached out and pulled her into a hug. She stiffened for a second, then collapsed against me. She cried into my shoulder, the deep shaking sobs of a child who has been holding her breath for a very long time. "You are safe now," I told her. "No one is selling you. No one is sending you away." An hour later, the house felt different. We sat in the kitchen. The expensive roast duck was cold on the counter. Instead, there were 3 cardboard boxes on the granite island. Mike and the boys were eating pepperoni pizza. They were laughing, telling stories about bad jobs and difficult trees. The room smelled of cheese, dough, and honest friendship. Emma sat on a stool, holding a slice. She took a bite. For the first time since she arrived, I saw a real smile touch her lips. I sat next to her. I watched Mike joke with his crew. This was family. Not blood, but loyalty. "I have a proposition," I said to Emma. She wiped tomato sauce from her lip. "What?" "I'm starting a new business," I said. "I'm bored with retirement, and I have a lot of capital now. I need a partner, someone smart, someone brave, someone who notices things like blue powder in a glass of water." Her eyes widened. "Me? I can teach you," I said. "Not just about business, about how to read people, how to stand your ground, how to build something that lasts." "We start tomorrow," I said, tapping the table. 6 a.m. Wear boots. We have work to do. "Teach me," she said. Her voice was strong. "Teach me everything." Later that night, I sat by the lake. The water was black and calm. I thought about Mace. I felt a pang of grief for the boy he used to be, but it was distant, like a memory of a bad dream. I looked back at the house. The lights were on in the kitchen. I could see Emma's silhouette moving past the window. Family isn't whose blood runs in your veins, it's who stands by you when the walls are falling down. I took a deep breath of the cold air. I was finally home. The next morning broke clear and bright. The sky was a piercing blue, scrubbed clean by the wind. I stood on the back porch with my coffee. The steam rose from the cup, curling into the morning air. My heart beat steady and slow. No monitors needed. I looked out at the garden. Emma was already there. She was wearing a pair of my old work gloves that were too big for her hands. She was on her knees in the dirt. She was pulling weeds. She yanked a stubborn vine out of the earth and tossed it onto a pile. She looked up and saw me. She pushed a strand of hair out of her face, leaving a smudge of dirt on her cheek. She waved. I waved back. My son was gone. My money was safe. But looking at her digging the soil, I knew I had won something far more valuable. I had saved the roots so the tree could grow again. Stories like this, about the scars we carry and the families we choose, remind us that justice isn't given, it's earned. If you felt the satisfaction of that final turn, if you stood with us in that ballroom, leave a like to mark the moment. And for more tales that cut deep and ring true, subscribe. The door is always open.